This is a United States Washington quarter dated 1985, a coin that at first glance may seem ordinary. Yet it represents a long chain of American history, economic practice, industrial production, and everyday life in the United States during the mid-1980s. The quarter dollar has always been one of the most widely used coins in American commerce, and by 1985, it had already been part of daily transactions for well over a century. This particular quarter carries a face value of 25 cents, 1/4 of a US dollar, a denomination that has been essential for vending machines, parking meters, public transportation, and small retail purchases throughout modern American history. The obverse of the 1985 Washington quarter features the familiar, left-facing portrait of George Washington, the first president of the United States. This design was created by sculptor John Flanagan and was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. What began as a commemorative design eventually became permanent due to its popularity and symbolic importance. By 1985, this portrait had become deeply ingrained in American visual culture. Nearly every American had seen this image thousands of times, often without giving it much thought. Yet it quietly reinforced the nation's connection to its founding era. The word liberty appears above Washington's head, a concept central to American identity, while the motto, "In God We Trust," is placed to the left of his profile. Below the portrait is the date 1985, marking the year of issue and anchoring the coin firmly in its historical context. The reverse of the Washington quarter, though not always described in brief summaries, is equally important. It features a heraldic bald eagle with outstretched wings, perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below. This design symbolizes both strength and peace, reflecting the dual nature of national power and responsibility. Above the eagle are the words United States of America, and below it is the denomination quarter dollar. This reverse design had been standard on Washington quarters since 1932 and remained in use until 1998, just before the introduction of the 50-state quarters program in 1999. Therefore, the 1985 quarter belongs to the final generation of traditional eagle reverse quarters that circulated widely before modern design changes transformed the series. In terms of composition, the 1985 Washington quarter is made of a clad structure consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This composition had been in use since 1965, when the United States Mint removed silver from circulating coinage due to rising silver prices and increasing production costs. Before that change, quarters were composed of 90% silver, making older examples valuable primarily for their precious metal content. By 1985, however, quarters were purely base metal coins, designed for durability and efficiency rather than intrinsic metal value. The copper core sandwiched between layers of copper-nickel alloy gave the coin strength, resistance to wear, and a consistent appearance suitable for mass circulation. The year 1985 itself places this coin in an interesting period of American history. The United States was in the midst of the Cold War, under the presidency of Ronald Reagan. The economy was experiencing changes shaped by industrial shifts, technological development, and global competition. Inflation, which had been a major issue in the late 1970s and early 1980s, was more controlled by the mid-1980s, and everyday coinage, like the quarter, played a crucial role in consumer confidence and daily transactions. Millions of these quarters passed through the hands of Americans buying newspapers, making phone calls from payphones, or paying for gasoline when prices were still measured in cents per gallon compared to modern standards. Regarding mintage, quarters produced in 1985 were struck in very large numbers. During this era, the United States Mint operated primarily to meet the demands of circulation rather than collectors. Quarters were minted at multiple facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver, and in some cases San Francisco for proof issues. Philadelphia minted coins traditionally carried no mint mark, while Denver minted coins bore a D, although the specific mint mark may not be visible or identified in this particular example. It is known that hundreds of millions of quarters were produced in 1985 alone. This massive production ensured that quarters were readily available across the country, reinforcing their role as one of the most commonly used denominations. Because of this high mintage, most 1985 Washington quarters are considered common coins today. In circulated condition, they typically carry only their face value, as their base metal composition and abundance limit their collectible premium. However, this does not diminish their historical or cultural significance. Coins like the 1985 quarter are artifacts of everyday life, reflecting how ordinary people interacted with money on a daily basis. Each scratch, worn edge, or faded detail tells a silent story of countless transactions, pockets, cash registers, and coin jars. For collectors, interest in the 1985 Washington quarter usually centers on condition rather than rarity. Coins that have never circulated, especially those preserved in mint state with sharp details and original luster, can carry modest premiums. Proof versions, struck with special dies and polished planchets for collectors, are also sought after, particularly when they are well preserved. Errors, such as off-center strikes or die varieties, can also increase a coin's desirability, though such examples are relatively rare and require careful examination to authenticate. Beyond numismatic value, the 1985 Washington quarter represents continuity. It is part of a design lineage that lasted more than 6 decades, linking generations of Americans through a shared familiar object. Long before commemorative reverses, special finishes, and frequent design changes became common, the Washington quarter served as a stable, unchanging symbol of American currency. People born in the 1930s and people born in the 1980s would have recognized essentially the same coin in their pockets, reinforcing a sense of national consistency. In a broader sense, this coin also reflects the philosophy of modern coinage. By prioritizing durability, ease of production, and practicality, the United States Mint ensured that coins like the 1985 quarter could withstand years of heavy use. While it lacks the precious metal content of earlier issues, it fulfills its intended purpose efficiently. It is a tool of commerce, a small but essential component of the economic system, and a tangible reminder of a specific moment in American history. When viewed not just as spare change, but as a historical object, the 1985 Washington quarter becomes more than a 25-cent piece. It embodies the legacy of George Washington, the artistic vision of John Flanagan, the industrial capacity of the U.S. Mint, and the everyday experiences of millions of Americans. Though common, it quietly tells a story of continuity, practicality, and national identity, making it a meaningful artifact despite its modest appearance and face value. As the years passed, the 1985 Washington quarter continued its journey through circulation, gradually showing the effects of use. The once sharp details of George Washington's hair and facial features softened as the coin moved from hand to hand, and the high points of the eagle on the reverse began to wear down. These signs of circulation were not considered damage, but rather proof that the coin was fulfilling its purpose. Each small scratch or worn edge was a record of countless transactions and moments in everyday life. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, many 1985 quarters were already deeply embedded in the nation's coin supply. They mixed freely with quarters from earlier and later years, indistinguishable to most users except by the date. Unlike commemorative coins or special collector issues, these quarters were not set aside or protected at the time of issue. They were designed to work, not to be admired, and this practical role defined their existence for decades. For coin collectors, however, the 1985 quarter holds quiet significance. It belongs to a period when the U.S. Mint was producing enormous quantities of coins, yet subtle variations still occurred. Differences in strike strength, die wear, and planchet quality can be observed among surviving examples. Some coins display sharper lettering and stronger details, while others appear flat or weakly struck. These small differences are of interest to numismatists who study minting practices and quality control during the 1980s. Certain uncirculated examples of the 1985 quarter, particularly those preserved in mint sets or rolls, remain in remarkably clean condition. These coins show bright luster, smooth fields, and crisp edges, offering a glimpse of how the quarter originally appeared when it left the mint. Although they are not rare, such well-preserved pieces are increasingly harder to find as time passes and more coins succumb to wear, damage, or loss. The proof versions of the 1985 Washington quarter, struck specifically for collectors, present a contrast to the standard circulation strikes. These coins were produced using specially prepared dies and polished planchets, resulting in mirrored backgrounds and frosted design elements. Proof quarters from this year were never meant for everyday use. Instead, they were sold directly to collectors as part of proof sets. Their condition today often remains excellent, preserved in protective packaging, making them valuable examples of the mint's craftsmanship. From a historical perspective, the 1985 quarter also reflects the final years before major changes in American coinage design philosophy. For much of the 20th century, U.S. coins emphasized stability and tradition, rarely altering their appearance. This approach helped maintain public trust in the currency but limited opportunities for artistic variation. The quarter's familiar Washington and eagle design symbolized this long-standing commitment to continuity. That approach shifted in the late 1990s when the U.S. Mint launched the State Quarters program, introducing new reverse designs that celebrated individual states. When this program began in 1999, the classic eagle reverse that had appeared on quarters for over 6 decades was retired. In retrospect, the 1985 quarter became part of the closing chapter of that era, representing a time when uniformity and tradition defined American circulating coinage in everyday life. Coins like the 1985 Washington quarter often go unnoticed, yet they form the foundation of countless routines. They were used in grocery stores, gas stations, arcades, and payphones, becoming silent participants in daily economic activity. Their durability allowed them to remain in circulation for decades, far outlasting many of the products and technologies they were once used to purchase. Even today, it is still possible to encounter a 1985 quarter in circulation. When found, it serves as a small, tangible connection to the mid-1980s, a period shaped by cultural change, technological advancement, and economic adjustment. The coin's continued presence demonstrates the longevity of modern U.S. coinage and the effectiveness of its design and materials. Ultimately, the 1985 Washington quarter is not defined by rarity or high monetary value, but by its role as a workhorse of the American monetary system. It tells a story of mass production, national identity, and everyday utility. Through decades of circulation, it has quietly fulfilled its purpose, reminding us that even the most ordinary objects can carry history within them. The 1985 Washington quarter exists today as a quiet but telling artifact of everyday American life in the mid-1980s, a period when coins were still essential tools of daily commerce and not yet overshadowed by digital payments. When this quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it entered a long tradition that stretched back to 1932, the year the Washington quarter was first introduced to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. By 1985, that design had already been in continuous use for more than half a century, making it one of the most familiar coin designs in the United States. The metal composition of the 1985 Washington quarter reflects an important shift in American coinage history. Earlier quarters minted before 1965 contained 90% silver, but rising silver prices forced the U.S. Mint to abandon precious metals for circulating coins. By 1985, the copper-nickel-clad composition had been standard for 2 decades. The coin consists of an outer layer of copper-nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This layered structure gave the quarter durability, resistance to wear, and a distinctive edge that reveals a thin copper stripe when viewed from the side. That stripe is a subtle reminder of the coin's inner structure and a clear sign that it belongs to the modern, non-silver era of U.S. coinage. On the obverse, George Washington's portrait dominates the design, facing left in a dignified and restrained profile. Sculptor John Flanagan created this likeness based on a bust of Washington by French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon. The portrait had already become deeply embedded in American culture by 1985, instantly recognizable to anyone who handled money in the United States. Above Washington's head appears the word liberty, a concept central to the nation's identity and political philosophy. To the left of his profile is the motto, "In God We Trust," a phrase that had been mandated on U.S. coins decades earlier and had become a standard feature of American currency. Together, these elements form a composition that is not flashy or dramatic, but calm and authoritative, reflecting the image Americans traditionally associate with their first president. The presence of the Mint mark is particularly significant for the 1985 issue. For most of the 20th century, coins struck at the Philadelphia Mint did not carry a mint mark at all. Unlike coins from Denver or San Francisco, this practice changed in 1980, when the U.S. Mint began placing a P on most Philadelphia minted coins to clearly identify their origin. As a result, the 1985p Washington quarter belongs to the relatively early years of this change. The small p, located on the obverse near Washington's ponytail, quietly signals its birthplace and distinguishes it from quarters struck in Denver or San Francisco during the same year. In 1985, the United States was experiencing economic stability. Compared to the turbulence of the 1970s, inflation had eased, vending machines were everywhere, and quarters were essential for payphones, parking meters, laundromats, and arcade games. Millions of 1985p Washington quarters were produced to meet this demand, and they circulated widely across the country. These coins passed through countless hands, resting in pockets, purses, and cash registers, often without a second thought. Each coin absorbed small marks and scratches over time, evidence of its role as a working object rather than a collectible treasure. Despite their common appearance, these quarters still hold interest for collectors today. In circulated condition, a 1985p Washington quarter is typically worth slightly more than its face value, generally ranging from about 30 cents to 85 cents depending on wear and overall eye appeal. This modest premium reflects both inflation and the steady demand from collectors who assemble date and mint sets of Washington quarters. While most examples show signs of circulation, uncirculated coins that escaped everyday use can command higher prices, especially if they retain their original luster and sharp details. Some collectors pay close attention to strike quality and surface condition, as not all 1985p quarters were produced equally. Coins with strong strikes, clear lettering, and minimal marks are more desirable. In rare cases, mint errors such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or double dies can dramatically increase a coin's value. These errors occurred unintentionally during the minting process and were usually caught and destroyed, but a small number entered circulation. When discovered, such error coins can sell for far more than standard examples, transforming an otherwise ordinary quarter into a prized collectible.